All right, let's get into a geopolitical headline that sounds like it's straight out of a history book. The United States wanting to buy Greenland. You know, what started as a story that made a lot of us do a double take actually has these incredibly deep historical roots and, honestly, massive implications for the future of the Arctic.
So here's how we're going to break this all down. First, we'll look at the modern-day controversy that kicked this whole thing off again. Then we'll hit rewind and explore the long history behind this idea. After that, we'll dive into why Greenland is such a huge strategic prize, try to figure out what it's even worth, and see how this all spiraled into a real diplomatic crisis. And finally, we'll turn to the most important voice in this whole debate, the people of Greenland. Okay, let's jump right into the moment this story just exploded back onto the world stage back in 2019. So when news first broke that President Trump was seriously looking into buying Greenland, the response from Denmark's Prime Minister, Mette Frederiksen, was, well, it was swift and it was sharp. She called it an absurd discussion. No wiggle room. She made it crystal clear this was not some real estate deal on the table. And her final point, Greenland is not Danish, Greenland is Greenlandic, that really hits on the fundamental truth here. The days of powerful countries buying and selling populated lands are just over. But here's where it gets really interesting. While the whole world was kind of shocked by this idea, it turns out that the U.S. wanting to own Greenland isn't new at all, not even close. In fact, it has this surprisingly long and very serious history. So let's wind the clock back a bit. This American ambition, it goes all the way back to the 19th century. The whole story really kicks off in 1867. You see, the U.S. had just bought Alaska from Russia, and Secretary of State William Seward was feeling ambitious. He actually commissioned a super detailed report on buying not just Greenland, but Iceland too. And the report came back glowing, pointing to the island's resources and, even way back then, its key military location. Now, that idea fizzled out, but the ambition didn't. Fast forward to 1917, and a deal actually happens. The U.S. pays Denmark $25 million in gold for the Danish West Indies, what we now call the U.S. Virgin Islands. But the biggest move came in 1946. The Cold War was just starting, and President Truman saw how vital Greenland was. It was the perfect spot for early warning radar to detect Soviet bombers coming over the North Pole. So he secretly offered Denmark $100 million for it. The Danes said no, but the message was loud and clear. For the U.S. military, Greenland was an absolutely priceless strategic asset. And this comparison just lays it all out, doesn't it? It shows exactly why a 1917-style deal is completely impossible today. Back then, Denmark saw the Virgin Islands as a colony that wasn't making them any money. And, selling off colonies was just something countries did. In fact, in the very same treaty for the Virgin Islands, the U.S. officially recognized that Denmark owned Greenland. Today, that's a whole different world. Greenland is an autonomous territory, it has a legal path to its own independence, and international law is all about the right of people to determine their own future. And, of course, the people of Greenland have made it very, very clear. They are not for sale. So that gets us to the really big question. Why all the fuss? Why this decades-long interest? What makes this massive, ice-covered island so unbelievably important to a superpower like the United States? Honestly, one look at a map tells you pretty much everything you need to know. Geographically, Greenland is the anchor of the Arctic. It sits perfectly positioned between North America, Europe, and Russia. It basically controls the shortest air routes over the North Pole, something that was crucial during the Cold War and is maybe even more crucial today. You'll often hear it called the world's largest unsinkable aircraft carrier. It's a permanent strategic outpost in a region where global competition is heating up, fast. Its value really boils down to three critical things. First up, military significance. Greenland is home to Pitifix Space Base, America's most northern military installation. This place is the backbone of U.S. missile defense. Its radars can spot incoming missiles from halfway across the planet. Plus, Greenland helps control the GIUK gap. That's the naval choke point between Greenland, Iceland, and the U.K., which is essential for keeping tabs on Russian subs. Second, new trade routes. As the Arctic ice melts, new shipping lanes are opening up. The Northwest Passage could literally shave weeks off a trip from Asia to Europe. Controlling the front door to these new sea highways is a massive economic prize. And third, and this is a huge one, natural resources. Under all that ice, there's a staggering amount of untapped wealth. Oil, gas, copper. But the real treasure is rare earth minerals, the stuff you need for everything from your smartphone to a fighter jet. Securing a friendly supply of those would be a game changer, especially since rivals like China currently dominate that market. And that's not me being dramatic. Listen to Walter Burbrick from the Naval War College.
Whoever holds Greenland will hold the Arctic. He calls it the most important strategic spot in the Arctic, maybe even the world. It really is the central piece on this rapidly changing global chessboard.
So with all that strategic value, you inevitably get to this really fascinating and kind of weird question. How on earth do you put a price tag on an entire country? We know Truman's offer back in '46 was $100 million. Now, if you just adjust that for inflation, it's about $1.6 billion today. But if you calculate it based on a percentage of the U.S. economy then versus now, it's more like $13 billion. Either way, it's a lot of money, but it's nothing compared to some of the modern estimates being thrown around. And today's estimates, they are all over the map. I mean, really, it just shows you how complicated this is. If you're just looking at what's in the ground, the minerals you could actually mine, you get a number around $186 billion. But if you value it for where it is, its strategic real estate, the price just skyrockets. One calculation, using Iceland's value as a comparison, puts the price at a mind-boggling $2.76 trillion. The Financial Times landed somewhere in the middle, around $1.1 trillion. It all just depends on what you think is more valuable, its resources or its location. So, when this whole idea was brought up again, it didn't just stay a weird hypothetical question. It spiraled, and it spiraled fast, from an absurd idea into a genuine diplomatic crisis between two NATO allies. So after Denmark and Greenland shot the idea down, some security experts started running simulations, wargaming what could happen next. And in one of those scenarios, they imagined a future president in 2026 saying something like, "We're going to be doing something with Greenland, either the nice way or the more difficult way." Now, to be clear, that's a hypothetical quote from a simulation, but it shows you the kind of thinking that was going on, how a purchase offer could quickly escalate into something way more aggressive. The whole situation got so tense that analysts started using a term you almost never hear to describe actions between allies: hybrid warfare. And this isn't about tanks and soldiers. It's a strategy where you use all sorts of non-military pressure: economic threats, disinformation campaigns, intense diplomatic arm twisting, all of it designed to force another country to do something against its will. To hear that term applied to the relationship between the U.S. and Denmark was, well, it was shocking. And then came the moment that sent absolute shockwaves through the diplomatic community. Danish intelligence did something that was just unthinkable. They officially reclassified their oldest ally, the United States, as a potential threat to their national security. This wasn't just a political disagreement anymore. This was a deep, fundamental break, and it showed just how seriously Denmark was taking the whole situation. But amidst all this great power chess playing, there is one voice that is without a doubt the most important one, and that is the voice of the Greenlandic people themselves. See, under both Danish and international law, Greenland's future isn't actually for sale. There's something called the Self-Government Act of 2009, and it gives Greenland the legal right to hold a referendum on full independence anytime it wants. Now, it would still have to be approved by the Danish parliament, but the path is there. And what's really crucial is that Greenland's own government has said that full independence is their ultimate goal. They see themselves as a nation on the road to sovereignty, not as a piece of property to be traded. And when you ask the people of Greenland directly what they think, the answer is just overwhelming. A poll from January 2025 found that a massive 85% of Greenlanders are opposed to becoming part of the United States. This isn't a 50-50 split. It's a near unanimous rejection, grounding this whole debate in the clear democratic will of the people who actually live there. So all of this leaves us with one final, absolutely critical question that's going to shape the future of the Arctic. Greenland is forging its own path. The question is, how will it see the superpower right next door? Will the U.S. become a respectful partner helping Greenland achieve its goals, or will it always be seen as a persistent buyer or maybe even a threat? The answer to that is going to have huge consequences, not just for Greenland, but for the balance of power across the entire world.